This class is about the new Jesus people, right? My introduction to them was about 9 years ago when they appeared to me in a night vision. I was walking a neighborhood road and came upon an empty field. A group of people scattered throughout the field was working. They had tools and seemed to be preparing the ground, perhaps for future building. When I arrived, they stopped their work and looked up at me with a mixture of sober interest and expectation. I locked eyes with the young man near the front who seemed to be their leader. Somehow at that moment, my life changed. They paused their work and stood there silently. I recognized them. They were people with whom I attended college in the mid-'80s. They were familiar, yet their dispositions looked much different in the vision than they did in college. Throughout the field, they all just looked at me and waited. I knew instinctively that they conducted their lives with great purpose. So I knew that this strange encounter, along with their quiet, focused posture toward me, were filled with meaning. But what was it? Externally, everything about the vision was entirely bland. The group's activity was completely unassuming, even pedestrian. They were dressed like ordinary people, blue jeans and casual work shirts. And they were doing ordinary things. But something about them arrested me deep in my spirit. What was it? As the weight of their presence began to settle on me, I became unsettled. I knew the people in the field were followers of Jesus Christ, but they were not typical followers according to what I was used to or what I was myself. And the difference was beyond severe. It was intimidating. Now, mind you, they have not said a word to me. They've only looked at me. They were the most authentic disciples I had ever encountered. It was clear that they had developed spiritually to a rare depth of maturity and wholeness. How did I know this? By just looking at them, as they did nothing but look back at me. I knew by intuition. I knew because my spirit intuited an invisible, compelling influence that came from deep inside them. I knew by their faces. Though they were not smiling or trying to look peaceful or trying to look spiritual, their faces expressed a deep rest that dreaded nothing and seemed to gaze into an invisible place that was very real to them and in which they knew they would live forever. They had been liberated from the bondage imposed on our race by the fear of death. Indeed, it was clear they were already dead to those things for which most people lived, and they lived for God alone. Their faces testified to that freedom and the deep assurance of eternal life. Unfeigned serenity and innate beauty gushed up from the internal assurance possessing them and mingled with their facial features. They had more than calm expressions. They had faces like angels. It took only an instant to register the group's faces and get knocked off kilter. Immediately, I felt isolated in my carnality and totally out of my league. Meanwhile, during those first brief moments of trying to find myself in their presence, which I never did, they just stood there and peacefully looked at me. It seemed every insecurity I had surfaced right then. Suddenly, it was clear that I wasn't so spiritual. They were undisturbed, with no need to speak or make something happen. I was unhinged and had to speak. The silence was revealing my hollowness. Whatever subtle facade I enjoyed among other people was gone. I was totally exposed. I was naked. But there were no leaves for clothing or trees for hiding. I had to start throwing words out to cover my nakedness now. Remember, they have not said a word. Think, Bob, say anything. Find a way to bring them down to your level. My wife and I would like to have all of you over to our house to eat. Good save. They're cornered by hospitality, which is biblical. Followers of Jesus can't argue with the Bible. Plus, since they're close to God, they must be nice. They wouldn't turn down a generous invitation. At my house, we can enjoy normal Christian fellowship and alleviate the discomfort of this profoundly awkward moment. We're all set. The young man in the foreground, the one who seemed to be their leader, responded with his first words, "You don't understand." Those simple words, the sober face, the deep, all-knowing tone, they all combined to reveal both my knee-jerk reaction for what it was, as well as my present spiritual ignorance. But he was not frustrated. His solemn words came with grace. They seeped life. It was obvious he cared for me and cared about our interaction. Yet there was also an eerie kind of disappointment in the timbre of his voice that hurt. He continued to explain plainly, "There are 70 of us." He said those 5 words deliberately. I knew he was not trying to be practical as if there were too many people in their group to fit in our house. He was trying to tell me something. He was trying to communicate something in code with calm urgency. It was one of the reasons they appeared to me. And even though I knew deep down that he didn't care about the size of my living room, I bumbled into my next statement in a feeble attempt to gain some composure and some meaning on my own terms. "Yes, right," I responded. "We'll just bring you all something to drink right here." We were on 2 different tracks. Out of my ignorance and self-consciousness, I was trying to create a shallow situation because I couldn't tolerate the deeper one. Looking back, I wish I simply would have let the conviction wound me. Taken a deep breath, and in spite of myself, asked them to explain what they meant and what sort of salutation this might be. That would have been the spiritually virgin thing to do, but at the time, I was too grown up for that, too wise, too lustful for control, too protective of my soul, too proud to admit what I needed. Again, he spoke the same words. "You don't understand." This time the words were more decisive. They contained disappointment and pain again, but they also carried an inviting mist, suggesting that I would understand later if I sought answers. The group continued to look at me. This time, I wised up enough to keep my mouth shut and wait. I let them conquer my insecurity by the sheer authority of their peace, by the ease with which they remained in the Spirit, and by their courage to love me with God's love rather than human sympathy. The leader broke the silence with one last surprising comment. "We are from Kansas City." And the vision ended.